Good afternoon. Before we get started, though, we've got a lot of information today, yes? Our heads are kind of swimming a little bit. Maybe a deep breath. Kind of let the brain rest a little, because I always find as you get toward the later part of the afternoon, it gets a little tougher to stay focused. And so, as Dan said, what I was thinking about licensing in the context of medical device industry, and today, especially as you started in the morning, you've been hearing bits and pieces about it. You've been hearing about licensing as it relates to breakthrough technologies, licensing as it relates to protecting your IP, licensing as it relates to strategies for startups. And so what I'm going to do here in the short time that I have is give you a quick introduction to kind of weave the pieces together so that you can see licensing in the context of how you apply it as a business strategy, because it's really that. But to begin with, one of the things to think about, what is the theme that you've really been hearing about the medical device and the medical technology industry today? What is the one theme that seems to be coming clear? Change. Big change is coming, which means that the way that you're doing things today can't continue. What you need is a game changer. And so today we're going to be talking about what that game changer is.
You know, I'm not interested in your retail strategy. I'm interested in your licensing strategy. I am the king of licensing strategies. If you want to become the standard, as Mark said earlier, change the game.
You're exactly right.
You've got to grow very quickly, and you've got to get the top 3 guys to license this from you, and that's where I am going to come in really handy.
So that is where I'm going to come in really handy. And that is really changing your game, because that's what you need today is to change your game. So what I'm going to take you through is talking about it from the standpoint of startups and IP, and really looking at why is licensing a strategy that needs to be at the forefront of what you're doing, when to use it, how to use it, and what's involved. So let me start with just a little bit of background about myself. As Dan said, I come out of the entertainment industry, and I got my start at a time when the entertainment industry didn't even really care about licensing. I joined Warner Brothers at a time they had a movie called Batman, and they shipped it off to London because they didn't think it was going to sell, because it was about a comic book character that hadn't been seen in 20 years. And in the 1970s and early 80s, they'd had about 1,000 Superman movies done that had come out, and they figured it was done. So when I was hired, there was literally nobody in the licensing industry. It was an afterthought. And we couldn't find anybody to license this movie. The biggest companies in the world, toy companies, didn't want it. The biggest retailers weren't interested. Instead, it was small companies, startups, out of their garage, mom and pops, who were showing up, and we were either dumb enough or smart enough to figure out that there was something here. In fact, the guy that got the license for at that time they were action figures, he started in his garage, those plastic action figures. The movie came out and went, I hate to say it, like a bat out of hell. And suddenly the studios perked up. At that time, not even Columbia, Universal, Disney was about the only one that had a few people in their division. Fox never had a licensing division. By the way, you know why Lucas made all his money? Fox never bothered to take the merchandise rights on Star Wars because they didn't see any value in it. He kept all the merchandise rights. Of course, now merchandise is even bigger than the movies. And today, when you look at the studios, it's all a merchandise machine. But what it did demonstrate was the power of licensing. And obviously, as you fast forward, from there, I moved and went to another big blockbuster called Power Rangers. How many of you have kids? Are any of these, did you buy any of these things for the kids and they played with them? And thank you for supporting my lifestyle on that. I really appreciate it. So as Dan said, now I have my own business. I'm on the other side of the desk because I saw that there's a real opportunity, but I also saw that there's a lack of understanding by many companies about what licensing is and how to use it. So my focus is on licensing, strategy, figuring out what to do with the IP and how to commercialize it, who to go to, actually reaching out in the selling process, and that's a big chunk of time, is how do you get out there, reach these companies, negotiate the deals, and most important, compliance, making sure everybody does what they say they're going to do. And so I've worked with a variety of different types of technologies. My latest assignment was working on an oral healthcare device technology that we've placed with a very, very large company. It's always interesting to see how these companies respond. I've worked on, with the University of Arkansas, a cooking technology, a hair color packaging technology, which revolutionized the way professional hair salons and manufacturers can save money with hair color packaging, and then international rights from some of the big major movie franchises for China, which was always an interesting deal. Always interesting stories when you deal with the studios because it can get pretty wild. So with that introduction, I want to move into now talking about licensing from a startup perspective. And really, when you think about startups, you've got two choices, two options really. You're either going to compete or collaborate. Now, most people go down the competition side of it because that's where they think the big money is. But collaboration is really where the better side of it is, especially today in a changing market. Because what happens is speed to market is what wins the race today. You may have a technology, you may have a patent, but you don't have a long economic life anymore because they're so quickly displaced by new technologies. But more important, the average lifespan of startups can be very short. Sometimes it's only 2 years, and in most cases, 90% of them are going to die. And the reason they die is because it's such a long road to go from starting where you have initial success to running into the showstoppers, the unknown, the lack of money, and all the other things that happen to you as a startup. So the question is, how can you improve your odds? That's where licensing can be a game changer. And if you don't believe me, ask Bill. You all recognize this gentleman up here? Bill Gates. He did a deal. He did a licensing deal with IBM, who at that time had a computer with no operating system in it or one that the consumers understood. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is, what did he see in that deal? Why would he license out the rights to his software to a bigger company to run with it? Was it pure luck? Did he see a bigger market shifting? Did he figure out a way to take his technology, embed it in everything, educate the consumer, and build a big company? Probably all of the above, but what he did see is a changing market, and he took advantage of it through licensing. So licensing is a very smart startup strategy, especially in a big changing market. Key here is it reduces your time to market. You've heard today about all the regulatory changes. How much time is that going to take? How much load, overhead, cost, expense is that going to add to what you're doing? Think about it this way. These large companies have divisions that do nothing but work on this compliance and regulatory. The other important thing is think about the risk that it shifts. You're very risky in a startup, especially you move down the road one day and then suddenly the regulations change. Now you're back to square one. So there's a lot of risk associated with it, and more importantly, licensing is a strategy that can help you avoid the valley of death. Now, licensing versus selling, there's a difference. When you're starting your company and you're out there competing, you're selling one customer at a time, one product at a time. When you license, you're out there getting royalties for one or more markets simultaneously. The key word there is simultaneously. It's not an either or. Licensing is used to create multiple streams of income from your IP. Going back to the studio example, when we licensed Batman or any of the Power Rangers, we're talking hundreds of companies producing thousands of products in all markets, all types of consumer products. Imagine what kind of revenue that was generating and still generates today. So when should you use licensing? Well, based on what we've discussed here, number one, when there's heavy regulation. Two, there's intense competition. Is the medical industry facing intense competition? You bet it is. Where's it coming from? Well, medical device, pharmaceutical, big technology, electronics, retail, you name it. They're all converging on this industry. So it's time to be thinking about a different type of strategy. And also, more importantly, if you have incremental IP. We talked about earlier today, breakthrough. Most technology today is incremental, meaning it goes inside and improves something, makes it better, faster, cheaper. If you've got something incremental that goes inside, as many medical devices do, or as perhaps a medical device that even fits inside a product line of a bigger company, you should be thinking about licensing, because that incremental technology can be part of a bigger product or a bigger product line. So why would a big company want your IP? And they do want your IP, especially medical technology. First of all, they're getting out of the R&D business. They're too slow. They can't do it fast enough. You've been hearing about startups here that are moving so quickly. Even the medical device and medical technology market is moving too fast. Second of all, they're not very innovative. How many have been inside these large corporations? Are they an innovative bunch? Very creative? No. In fact, they're setting up outside deals between each other to try to come up with innovation hubs. And third, they're not big risk takers. When I look at this, outsiders innovate, insiders insulate. They've got to protect what they have. They've got to protect their market share, their manufacturing, their distribution. They've got all those resources. That's too big. They need to fill their pipeline. So how licensing works? It's actually very simple. You have the IP. You give them rights to make and use it and sell it somehow. They pay you money, and you keep control of your IP. Very important to understand. You keep control of your IP. You could keep ownership of your IP. So licensing 101, a few terms you should be aware of. Licensor, you're the licensor. You own it. The licensee is the renter. They're the people that license it from you. The rights are what you give them, and the royalty rate is how you get paid. So understand that there's a difference between licensing and a license, because you hear the term a lot. A license is a legal agreement. That's what you sign between each other, telling you what you're going to be doing. The licensing is a process. Much like you have business development, marketing, sales, licensing is the same thing. It's a process. And when you go through that process, the most important point of licensing is you have to find the right partner. It's a relationship, and it's long-term. Once you sign the deal, it's real hard to get undone. This is the most important point, and it's not always the biggest company. You'd be surprised at how many companies are coming out of the blue and moving into the market, and they're looking for technology. That's your point of entry, and that's your point of opportunity. And the key to it is show me the money. We've talked about developing your IP, product development, testing it, getting through the regulatory environment. The most important thing you can do here is get it to the point where you can prove it works and document or demonstrate the money aspect of it. To give you an idea of how that works, it's simple. The big markets, the closer it is to market ready, the more you get. Here's how that would look in the medical device or medical technology marketplace. If you've just got a raw idea or a patent, it's not worth much of anything. As you progress up the ladder toward getting an issued patent, you prototype it preclinical, you get into your clinical trials. The closer you get to the market, the higher the royalty. You don't necessarily have to get through the FDA approval to get it licensed. In fact, the recent deal that I did has done that pre-FDA approval because that company is going to take it on. They see more value in the IP as it stands today and would rather take it now than waiting for the approval process because they have a big pipeline that can get that done quickly. So when you negotiate it, the idea is if you find the right partner, it's win-win. Now, this morning we talked about your IP rights from a legal standpoint. Keep in mind these things can be sliced and diced. You don't have to give all of the markets and all of the world to your licensing partner. Okay? You control those rights. There's many ways that you can do it. One of the deals that I'm working on now, and this is a huge pharmaceutical company all over the world, but they're only going to start with a certain part of the oral health care technology. That's all that we're going to license, even though they know there's other parts. Those other parts are going to go in the form of an option to get them. I like options. Options mean you pay more money. And that's what you can do with licensing, is to make sure that you slice and dice those rights in such a way that you can get the most out of your IP. And by the way, just because you license it doesn't mean you can't use it for your own direct markets as well. And finally, when you look at a licensing agreement, understand this. First and foremost, it is a performance-based agreement. I'll repeat that, performance-based. That means you put in there the benchmarks, milestones, what I will do, what you will do, what happens if you don't do it, and how we get out of the deal. That's what they are. The biggest mistakes occur because IP owners don't take the time to make sure they build those milestones. In the case of technology such as medical, it's the development cycles, it's the approval cycles, it's the FDA, it's the clinicals. Whatever the case is, those have to be met to keep the license in force. So when you think about licensing as a game changer, in summary, the most important things to keep in mind: prove it works, find the right partner, show them the money, negotiate win-win, and most importantly, be proactive in using the licensing strategy. That's it. Thank you very much. I've got a newsletter. If you're interested, sign up. Comes out every couple of weeks. I write about different aspects of licensing, applying it strategically, and also from an application in terms of using it on your own types of technology. If you have any questions, I'll be here and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.